Can we start the housekeeping comments, please?
Thank you for participating in today's meeting. If attending in person, please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room, and please silence all devices. If translation is provided, click on the globe at the bottom of your screen to select either English or Spanish. Public comment will be taken after each item. If you're in the auditorium and wish to comment, please use the iPads located in the lobby or complete a blue speaker card as available. If you need assistance, please find a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items. Times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. More time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on making a public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-2432. That's 909-396-2432. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
Good morning. Welcome. It's Friday, June 13th. I'd like to call officially the Hybrid Legislative Committee meeting of the South Coast Air Quality Management District to order. And I think Laura's going to do the roll call today.
Good morning.
Good
Mayor
morning.
Locke Dawson, absent. Supervisor Hagman. Vice Mayor Olmos.
Here.
Supervisor Perez. Councilmember Rahman, absent. Councilmember Caccioli.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Lara, thank you. And before we get into our discussion, I just want to thank staff, Ron's staff especially. We have meetings starting 8 o'clock, and you guys' information and technology, never a hiccup. You know, you're ready to go, 9 o'clock ledge, and then we got admin. So thank you for your great work. You're kind of behind the scenes, but you want to make it, thank you so much. And Lisa, I guess you're going to start us off with item number 1. And a lot of this is based on Mr. Supervisor Kurt Hagman, a good recommendation. Lisa, so it's an update on and discussion on state legislative and South Coast priorities. Lisa Tanaka, Deputy Executive Officer, Legislative, Public Affairs and Media. Go ahead, Lisa.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Next slide. This morning, we're going to have an overview and discussion on our state legislative session and South Coast AQMD priorities. Our three consulting firms will be doing the presentations. The first presentation segment will be done by Ross Buckley from Buckley Government Affairs. He'll be presenting the background and an overview of the governor's proposed May revised budget. Followed by Ross will be Paul Gonzalez, who will discuss the state legislative budget process, which is in the throes right now. I'll leave all the details for Paul. And he will then hand it off to Alfredo Arredondo from Resolute, who will lead us in a discussion on the cap and trade reauthorization, especially focused on AB 617. And then I will go over the status of South Coast AQMD sponsor bills and bills that our board has taken a position on, and then open it up for discussion and Q&A for all three firms. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ross Buckley. And next slide.
Thank you, Lisa, for that overview, and good morning, board and chair members. I think AQMD staff and Lisa gave me maybe the hardest assignment to date, and that's to make sense of some of the chaos that's going on in Sacramento, but we'll do my best to provide some background of what has been a very unique and sometimes very turbulent legislative session to start 2025, and what some of those contributing factors have been. As you'll see on this slide, I think one of the biggest factors has been first-term legislators. There's 37 new legislators in the legislature. That's 13 new members in the Senate and 24 new assembly members, which equals about 30% turnover. This has created a lot of shifts in dynamics in Sacramento in this first 6 months of the year. And it's members are still acclimating to the Sacramento process. figuring out what their relationships are, figuring out what their legislative priorities are, which just creates some uncertainty in Sacramento. I will say from my perspective, when you have 12-term legislators and they're turning their year 10, year 11, year 12, we kind of know where members stand, and they've been able to be briefed on a lot of subjects and are have a large depth of knowledge. And so when you have a new class of members come in, it's kind of like you're starting over and trying to figure out who all these folks are. As I just mentioned, one of the key reasons for this turnover is the terming out of the 2012 legislative class. They were the first class elected under the 12-year term limits. So the fact that they all turned out in 2024 is why you've seen such a big and large turnover. With staff, obviously, or with the member turnover, the staff, which plays a key part and a key role in the office, has also had a huge turnover in finding new offices, learning new members in new issue areas. What I will say, external pressures on this new legislature has been incredible this year. One, there's been the economic uncertainty with the conversations nationally about tariffs and the stock market uncertainty. And we know how much the market plays into our state budgets. But two, the devastating wildfires in Southern California played a large role. For some of these new members, that was month 1 or 2 in the legislature, and they were already dealing with their districts being on fire. As we move on from external pressures, I think, how do you deal with those external pressures? One of the easiest ways is by doing legislation or bills. It was announced at the beginning of this year that they were limiting the bill numbers for the next 2 years, the 2-year session, to 35 in both houses. Where in the Assembly, it was originally 50 bills. So it's 15 bills less per member. In the Senate, it was only 40. So quite a big drop off in numbers. And that was really to focus on oversight. Approximately already 1/3 of those bills are no longer moving forward as we reach kind of the halfway point. And then lastly, I think federal actions, whether that be executive orders from the president, repealing or threatening funding programs here in California, or more simply repealing the California Clean Waivers. We've seen a number of things where the California legislature has had to stop what they're doing and prioritize someone and respond to some of these federal actions in a kind of an expedited manner. And I'll use the cap and trade as an example of, the governor signed the president signed executive order in April, kind of calling out cap and trade, and immediately the governor and legislative leaders came together and said, hey, we're going to reauthorize this program, really jump-started some of the conversations around reauthorization this year. Next slide, please. Talking about some of the governor's May revise and budget, it seems like just yesterday he was, in Los Angeles dealing with the wildfires, giving his January budget proposal. But fast forward to this past May, which again, May 14th is the deadline for the governor to produce his May revise. And really, it's supposed to be a reflection of the tax revenues collected in April and an update on his legislative priorities. What we saw this May revise is that the governor is projecting now a $12 billion shortfall in this new fiscal year and a $20 billion structural deficit over the next year. And what he is calling a $16 billion 2-year slump, what he has dubbed the Trump slump here in California due to federal actions threatening the California budget. As you may recall, in January, he was actually predicting a small discretionary surplus of about $300 million because we had received roughly $16 billion in revenues we were not expecting. This has been quite a turn in just a little over 5 months from the January proposal to the May revise. Again, our economy and our budget remain one of the biggest in the nation, with approximately $322 billion of expenditures, of which $226 billion of our general fund expenditures. So very large numbers and a huge priority. Next slide, please. I think what the governor is doing to bridge that $12 billion deficit, he's really divided it into 3 buckets. One is he is offering a $5 billion around revenue borrowing and new funds, $5 billion in kind of freezes of programs to include some of the health programs, and then a $1.7 billion fund shift to GGRF for CAL FIRE. And that's one of the biggest elements of his May revise was this fund shift from CAL FIRE activities into the GGRF program. Essentially, what he has decided to do is say, we are prioritizing $1 billion for high-speed rail and this $1.7 billion for CAL FIRE, and the rest we're eliminating, and that we will discuss and figure out how we're going to spend the rest of the GGRF at another time. And theoretically, that will be after the reauthorization conversations. But what that means for South Coast and other air districts is that eliminated the AB 617 funding from the budget. And what I'll tell you right now is it's more or less silent on the issue right now. You know, up until probably the pandemic, we used the conference committee process for the Assembly and Senate to create their own budgets. Conference committee came together and came up with a budget, and then they negotiated with the governor. In this new era of kind of how we do the budget process, it's really the governor's budget is his May revise. Then the legislature gets together and creates their own budget, what they're doing now, and the next week we'll talk to here shortly. And then you know, that June 15th deadline, which used to be, you know, a very consistent and timely deadline, has now been pushed to more of this July 1st deadline of the start of the fiscal year, to really hammer out the three-party negotiation. So with that note, I will pass it on to Paul.
Well, thank you, Ross, and good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. So just kind of pick up where Ross left off. The legislature was faced with some severe budget challenges right out the gates this year. These challenges, many of which have stemmed from actions at the federal level, really include a lot of revenue volatility, trade and tariff impacts, Medi-Cal cuts, rollbacks on environmental programs, and the potential repeal of the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. Additionally, as Ross mentioned earlier, in January, the state was faced with addressing the devastating LA wildfires, and which includes the cost of cleanup in those communities, rebuilding those communities, and really the prevention of future wildfires throughout the state. It is estimated that the wildfires cost the state about $250 billion in damages and economic losses alone. So, and as you all know, many of the high-income earners that were impacted by the wildfires have been granted an extension on their taxes until October 15th of this year. And that really just leaves fiscal uncertainty for the state when they're trying to project revenues, you know, for this fiscal year and the out years. And as you all know, California lives and dies on income taxes and capital gains taxes. And while the state benefits significantly from this revenue during good economic times, it faces significant challenges during economic downturns. So the governor's January proposal reflected many of the challenges the state is facing, and that proposal is really intended to be the roadmap, or at least the governor's roadmap and kickoff to adopting a state budget. That January proposal is then reviewed and debated by the legislature, as Ross had mentioned, primarily through budget subcommittees in both the Assembly and the Senate. Then the governor releases his May revise, really updating his plan based on the latest revenue forecast. And then the legislature will work towards passing a balanced budget by the June 15th constitutional deadline. Otherwise, they will have to forfeit their pay. Next slide, please. So this year, the legislature did reach an agreement. It's a two-house agreement, and that budget agreement will be voted on today. In fact, the Assembly is debating the bill on the floor right now as we speak, and the Senate is going in at 10 a.m. to do the same. So the bill, SB 101, is the main budget bill, and it does reflect the two-house budget agreement to address the state's projected $12 billion shortfall. The agreement uses a blend of about $3.5 billion in cuts and almost $8 billion, $7.8 billion in borrowing and fund shifts from different accounts. The agreement draws down $7.1 billion from the state's rainy day fund, which leaves about $11.2 billion remaining in that account for the out years. And in addition to that, lawmakers have proposed to draw down $2.5 billion from the $4.5 billion in the state's special fund for economic uncertainties, leaving about $2 billion for that fund in the out years as well. So in an effort to really preserve core programs like Medi-Cal, education, housing, lawmakers are tapping into reserves and really employing short-term measures to try and balance the budget this year. However, the Legislative Analyst Office, the LAO, has warned the legislature that they project that the state will face operating deficits of about 15 to 20 billion annually, potentially depleting all of our reserves by 2029 if it goes unaddressed. There are two specific parts of SB 101 that I did want to highlight. One is it does include the governor's proposal to shift 35 million from the toxic substance control account to the lead acid cleanup fund for Exide residential cleanup. In addition, the governors may propose to move about or to use about 316 million from the Proposition 4, the climate bond, to backfill the state's general fund. SB 101, however, reduces that amount, cuts it in half to 142 million. So all that said, at the end of the day, the governor does have the power to line item veto specific appropriations before signing the bill, if he signs the bill at all. And just to be clear, this budget agreement is far from done. It does not tackle all of the issues facing the state budget. This is really what we call a paycheck budget, meaning the legislature will pass their budget agreement in order to continue to work through the summer to kind of finalize the budget agreement with the governor and come up with an overall budget agreement between the administration and the legislature. So we do expect the legislature to introduce and pass a number of budget trailer bills over the next few weeks. These will most likely include policy reforms, funding formulas, regulatory changes, all tied to the budget or some type of allocation. Unlike regular legislation, trailer bills can be passed very quickly and with limited public input, usually 72 hours in print, and often leading to a lot of controversy when they're used for major policy shifts. So trailer bills that are passed by the legislature and the governor, they also take effect immediately. So once the bill is signed, the law goes into effect. I know Ross had touched on it a little bit about AB 617 in the governor's May revise. AB 617 is not part of SB 101 either, and neither is part of the negotiations over cap and trade or cap and invest in GGRF. So I know Alfredo will be providing an update on cap and trade next, but I do want the committee to know that we are all working tirelessly to preserve AB 617 funding in this year's budget. And so with that, I will pass it over to Alfredo.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, Chair, members of the Legislative Committee. Alfredo with Resolute. Wanted to provide a kind of deeper dive on the current state of play regarding cap and trade reauthorization and the implications that it has on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and particularly AB 617 funding. So just to provide a quick recap of where we had been with AB 617, just 2 years ago, we had actually gotten a commitment from the administration and legislative leadership that AB 617 would be part of a 5-year commitment around the utilization of cap and trade funds in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, where that commitment had established that AB 617 funding would receive a minimum of $250 million, with the opportunity for us to advocate for more every year. We were now in the second year of that commitment, that 5-year commitment. And in January, AB 617 was part of the governor's proposed budget as it relates to the expenditure plan for the GGRF dollars. However, the floor shifted considerably, as Ross was mentioning, when the governor's May revision was presented, and it became clear that AB 617, along with every other appropriation that had been part of that 5-year commitment, was no longer being prioritized by the administration. And instead, they were only focused on high-speed rail funding and providing operations dollars to CAL FIRE at $1.5 billion to relieve cost pressures on the general fund. That kind of reinvigorated our engagement to ensure that it still remains a priority. And for that to happen, though, the first thing that needs to be dealt with by the legislature and the administration is that reauthorization of cap and trade. And so let me pause there too to also explain why it's so important. So over the last few years, the auctions, the quarterly auctions that take place, hosted by CARB, to sell the allowances that make up the cap and trade system have been fairly stable. But it wasn't until recently where there has been a lot of uncertainty, largely driven by federal action, about whether California's climate programs would continue, that has actually resulted in lower than expected revenue being generated at each auction. This last auction performed fairly poorly. So overall, for the ending the fiscal year, it ended about 1.5 billion under the projections that were expected. So a considerable amount of funding. I think generally we've come to expect 4.5 billion to 5 billion annually being generated by the auction, and that is what funds then the programs within the GGRF. So being able to demonstrate that that the legislature and administration are going to reauthorize cap and trade beyond 2030 to 2045, which is the state's carbon neutrality goal deadline, would send the signal to the market that it's going to be around, and it's been still politically supported by the legislature and the administration with the intention of stabilizing those revenues again. So this is why the cap and trade reauthorization vote is being prioritized ahead of discussions of how then you would spend the funds or how you would set up the expenditure plan from the GGRF. There's a lot of issues around affordability, the concerns around impacts to consumers have been top of mind to a lot of legislators. But I think there is also a growing awareness amongst new legislators that cap and trade is by default a least cost approach to being able to achieve our emissions reduction goals, because it is a market mechanism that allows for each actor to make decisions about how they can achieve compliance with their emissions reductions goals, either through the sale of allowances and the purchase of allowances, or through direct action if those actions are available to them. So with that, we can go to the next slide. So where we have been, just to reiterate again, AB 617 has been part of the discretionary pot of funding. So it has never been part of the continuously appropriated programs like high-speed rail, affordable housing, sustainable communities, et cetera. However, we had gotten that 5-year commitment that ultimately is now no longer relevant. And so for us, we want to ensure that once the expenditure plan is released in Budget Bill Junior in August, when the legislature reconvenes after the summer recess, that AB 617 funding is there at a level that is either at or more than the 250 million, ideally 300 million, to ensure that those important programs and activities can continue to move forward across California. So with that, happy to answer any questions if there are any. Oh, and I failed to mention that, a lot of the conversation that is happening in the legislature is not happening through a committee process yet. There are two what we term as policy vehicles that are moving through the legislature, one being authored by Senator Monique Limon and the other being authored by Assemblymember Jackie Irwin. Those will eventually be amended to include the actual language for the reauthorization. And we expect that to happen sometime between now and the middle of July before they go on recess. Because one of the issues that is driving action on this is that the next auction takes place on August 20th, which is only a couple of days after they return from the July recess. So if you want to influence and project stability in the market, then you should be able to then do the reauthorization before you go on recess to ensure that the market is receiving those signals. So with that, I will pause there. Happy to answer any questions.
Alfredo,
And
thank you.
turn it back over to Lisa now.
Russ, thank you. And David, thank you. Go ahead. Lisa, what do you want to do next?
Oh, great. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of quickly go over South Coast AQMD's priorities. So these are our sponsor bills and bills that the board has taken a position on. And I wanted to highlight here right now that all three of our consulting firms are engaged on all of this legislative work, as well as our team with Philip, Denise, Erica, Matt. We're pulling Matt from federal into state because it's such a busy year, and Maria, Laura, and Jocelyn as well. So all hands on deck on our legislative efforts. So beginning with our sponsor bills, and I'll keep it brief so we can get through and have lots of time for Q&A. AB 907 by Assemblymember Chen with principal co-author of Assemblymember Salache, so bipartisan bill. That is our bill to provide equal compensation for our Air District members representing us on the CARB board. So that bill has passed the Assembly and is now in the Senate, and it will be heard, I believe, coming up in the first or second week of July. I will note here that this bill has challenges. It has a fiscal, although it's a minimal amount of $55,000 or about $550,000. Anything fiscal is getting really flagged in this session. In addition, there's a lot of tension around CARB. When this bill was heard on the Assembly floor, it really came on the heels of a hearing in which Assemblymember Baines had asked a question to CARB Chair Leanne Randolph about the effects of the low carbon fuel standard, LCFS, on gas prices, and the answer wasn't satisfactory. And so when this bill got to the floor, Assemblymember Baines took it as an opportunity to sort of voice her opposition to CARB. But our bill did get out because we had done education that this was not about CARB. This was about supporting local air district representatives on their board. The next bill, AB 1338 by Assemblymember Salache, that is regarding metal shredding facilities. Quick reminder, Assemblymember Bonta had passed a bill in the previous session, which would require fence line monitoring at every metal shredding facility. We have been working with Assemblymember Salache. This bill is now past the Assembly and into the Senate, and we will be amending the bill and working with Assemblymember Bonta now to ensure that we're able to implement our own rules, which includes our own provisions for when air monitoring is needed and not dictated that it has to be for every facility. That would be very cost prohibitive, very expensive. The next bill, AB 1106 by Assemblymember Rodriguez. This was our air incident response bill. And again, in these challenging fiscal times, the bill did not make it out of appropriations, so it will not be moving forward. It is dead. However, on policy, we got good response. Everybody agreed that providing funding for air incident response and information for communities was important, but in this fiscal year, the price tag was beyond what they could support. We continue to work with Senator Allen's office. His chief of staff has been instrumental in looking for other ways to find funding to support these efforts, and we'll continue to engage in those discussions. Moving on to high priority bills, AB 605 by Assemblymember Murasucci, that has to do with a pilot project for cargo handling equipment. The board had requested us to work with the author or seek amendments, oppose with amendments. We've requested those amendments. The sponsor is PMSA. We've asked PMSA, number one, is to make sure that the cargo handling equipment under this pilot project also addresses criteria pollutants, not just greenhouse gases. Number two, that they limit the number of pieces of equipment so that it's not like, an open-ended number. And three, that they close a loophole so that it is a true pilot project and that they do not inhibit future cargo handling regulations that they're working on now. So we're in discussions right now with PMSA and the bill author. That bill has passed the Assembly and is on the Senate side. AB 1266 Salache, this bill is another PMSA bill. It would have required South Coast, AQMD, Bay Area, and San Joaquin to adhere to the Administrative Procedures Act, which is really like a state program, regulatory program for their socioeconomic analysis and fiscal analysis. We worked with Assemblymember Salache, and we came to a non-legislative solution. So that bill, he has parked it and will not be moving forward. The next bill, I'm going to save SB 34 for last because it's a little bit of a lengthier one. SB 526 by Senator Menjivar. This bill would have required South Coast AQMD to promulgate rulemaking or to amend our existing rules on aggregate recycling facilities. We've been working with the senator and we've come to a non-legislative solution. So she passed her bill out of the Senate and has parked it on the Assembly side. SB 34 Becker, this bill would have affected our ability on Title V permitting, backed embarked. That bill was held in appropriations and it's now effectively dead. And then the last one here is last year, you might recall there was a bill AB 98 by Assemblymember Carrillo, which did a number of things related to warehouses and setbacks. One of the provisions would require South Coast AQMD to conduct a study. The scope of the study was not realistic and wasn't really based on science and practice. And so our staff has been working with Senator Reyes on a corrective amendment to make sure that that study is in with the scope and is based on science. So based on timeline and the funding that they could provide. So we're really pleased that that has worked out. And going back to SB 34. So this bill by Senator Richardson would effectively prohibit South Coast AQMD to regulate or use our indirect source authority to regulate ports. So the largest source of emissions in our region. The bill is comprehensive. It's getting worse as it goes along. It now would even prevent us from an agreement, a pact, a memorandum of agreement, a covenant. It just is an extensive list of prohibitions on what we can't do. This is a bill sponsored by PMSA and ILWU. We have a full court press to oppose this bill. We are meeting with all of the Assembly leadership, Assembly member Isaac Bryan, who chairs Natural Resources. We are setting up meetings with Assembly Transportation and Appropriations. We've met with all the committee staff. Environmental justice organizations and community organizations have reached out to us to educate them on what this bill means. So we're educating them on what it is, and they have expressed, their opposition. So I just wanted to really flag that one as our top priority to stop this bill. Lastly, on our priorities, and I think Alfredo and all of our consultants really highlighted our fight for funding for AB 617 through the budget process and cap and trade reauthorization. So we are leading a coalition with CAPCOA and all of our sister air agencies in concert with our work on AB 34 and our sponsor bills. We're advocating for support for AB 617. Assemblymember Solaci is leading a bicameral letter of support for AB 617, both in the Assembly and the Senate. And we're helping to get signatures to show the support for this program. And again, our request is $60 million for implementation and $300 million for incentives. Next slide. Lastly, I'll just quickly go over these. These are all bills that our board has taken a position on. We do take them very seriously. We have been successful, and some of them have either passed, and we're continuing to work with their author. Notably, AB 1305, which we just took to committee, which would have imposed onerous reporting requirements, that's died. It's held in appropriations, and we oppose that bill. You'll see that we've had success also in AB 471, that's our CAPCOA providing compensation to smaller and medium-sized air agency board members. And let's see, what else do I highlight? I think the work is ongoing on SB 712 by Senator Grove, and that is the classic car bill. We provided suggested amendments. They made some of them. There's a lot of pressure for more negotiations on that bill, and we'll continue to work in that space. And with that, next slide. So I really want to allow enough time for discussion. Our priorities are focusing on opposition to SB 34 and advocating for funding for AB 617. We'll continue to push forward on our sponsor bills and all of our position bills, and doing so in concert with our consulting firms and all of our staff, and in coordination with our sister agencies and community members who reach out to us to be educated. And with that, I conclude our presentation and open it up for questions. All three firms are online.
Lisa, thank you. Great discussion, a great presentation. Before I go to our discussion, I want to open up quickly, and I may restrict the time for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Just please, I'll give you a moment to raise your hands. Any public comment on this item? And public comment, Bay, can I restrict it to 1 minute?
You're the chair. You can do anything you want.
Okay. Thank you. So public comment is restricted to 1 minute, and I'll give you another moment to raise your hands. I see one hand raised. I'll be cutting off public comment in a moment. Please raise your hands if you want to speak. I'm cutting off public comment right now. Moses, you have 1 minute. Go ahead. You're muted.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate you. Good morning, everyone. Moses Huerta here in Paramount. I just want to thank everyone for their efforts and especially fighting for the AB 617. I just want to highlight that we're all united in the front. A lot of work has been done in that AB 617 work. We have to do our best to keep that going. A lot of relationships were made with communities, and we need to continue that. We just can't pull the rug out of all this work. So I want to thank you all for the hard work, and we're united in this cause and keeping this going. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Moses. Public comment is closed now, and we go to discussion. Thank you, Lisa. You've got a good 25 minutes or 20 minutes at least. I'll open it up, board members, committee members who'd like to start it off. Kurt, Supervisor Hagman, please.
Thank you. I mean, Manny and I have been around for a while, and I don't think I've seen everything this chaotic on a number of levels. So I'm not going to ask you particularly for individual bills or budget. I'm just trying to get a sense of more of the mood up there, because it is going to be a conflict between the federal policies and the state policies, even more that we're seeing almost on a daily basis right now. I guess I'm looking for a crystal ball or advice. Is the state legislature more drawing the line and going to fight every battle? Are they looking at changing the policies or moderating anything, I guess is the question, because I think more the battle goes on. I think this carries the state budget issue multiple years. Like you was brought up, we have multiple things in LA coming up, including the Olympics and World Cup, the fire recovery, and a lot of this stuff depends on what kind of levels of support they get from the federal government. So I'm just trying to get the mood in the legislature, I guess, right now, and kind of see what your feelings are.
So Supervisor Hagman, if I may, I'll jump in and just kind of kick it off and see if my colleagues have any other perspectives. I would say that the legislature recognizes the need for a relationship with the federal government. I think they recognize that they're looking for leadership there and assistance with many of the challenges we're facing here in California. That said, I think that they feel like they're being bullied and that they have to stand up to the bully. And I don't think that they're going to change policies or step back. I think they're going to stand their ground firm and continue to fight those battles that they believe in. That's just my take on it. That's kind of the tone that I feel. But I'll turn it over to Ross or David or Alfredo and see if they have anything different that they see.
Thanks, Paul. I'll just add, Supervisor. I think, post the November election, particularly from the majority party here in California, there was a lot of conversations about, hey, we're taking these election results and we have to figure out how to make California cheaper. We have to make California more affordable. And there's a lot of conversations around this. Now, getting into this year and all of the things we've highlighted that the states face, from fires to economic uncertainties, I think that's kind of clouded their mission. I think they're still focused on trying to accomplish that goal. And I think some of that relies on, as you mentioned, federal government assistance to complete a lot of our big projects for some of these big programs. So I think there is, I think they're torn two different directions. One is to fight every headline they can but also understanding that there's real work, and people of California are not a time they're hurting here. So I think there's a real desire to help them.
So it was the one thing that I would add, and Ross kind of spoke to this earlier in his earlier presentation. Given the fact that we have a lot of new legislators, a lot of them are still learning the ropes, trying to figure out what the issues really are that they can, roll up their sleeves and get to work on. However, the attitude that I have been hearing consistently, and it's been kind of a breath of fresh air, is that there's an understanding that you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And as it relates to like affordability questions, I think there is a desire to try to find some of those solutions to make California more affordable to the average resident. And I think there's a general willingness to really engage in thoughtful conversation. However, it is challenging because every day you hear a new story coming out of the federal government or DC that is going to impact us, right? And I think a lot of that has been attenuated or mitigated through lawsuits. So we are seeing a lot of this being dealt with in the court system, and that means that we're not going to get immediate responses. It's going to take a little bit for things to really come into focus. As we've mentioned before, fully 1/3 of the state government's budget is reliant on federal funding that is passed through often at the county level. And so that is also still being um, looked at by a lot of folks up here in Sacramento to see how that's going to play out and what the true impact is going to be. So I think even with them passing a final budget in August, that's not going to be the end of it. So.
I see this as another tough budget year in California, even though in perspective, where it was 10 years ago is greatly increased, I think fivefold, which most of other household incomes haven't done that. At the same time, the volatility in the goals that they had from 4 years ago with a lot of federal grants, and now with all that stuff being cut off, it's really sharp turns on doing budgeting. I know how difficult that is for Sacramento. At the same time, I guess, again, I'm in the wrong business because if I was good at financial things, I'd be better off on the outside. But, the stock market seems to be coming back and holding, which has greatly affected Californians' income because we're off income tax base, and depends on how the economy does in the next 12 months. Definitely with the third largest economy in the world, this is going to be part of it. Is it going to hang in there or not? But that's all going to affect the state budget. And I'm just thinking, are they just trying to get by this year and just put the Band-Aid on it and see what happens next year? Or are they really starting to think longer term on the continued growth of California in economic matters? But we'll see. The bills, some of the bills are running are just like the typical ones every year. It really restricts a lot of that growth. And I haven't seen a lot of policy changes we've been asking for a long time from the local government of practical CEQA reform and other things that would help stabilize that economy. But I guess this commentary. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, almost any comments or suggestions? No? Did Manny go off or is he?
I'm still on.
Manny, did you want to?
Yeah, so can you, someone presented, I think, was it SB 34? Can you go back to that?
Yes.
I'd like to catch that one more time there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you get a little bit more just specific on all that?
Yes. So SB 34 is sponsored by PMSA and ILWU. And what the bill would do is it prohibits South Coast AQMD from taking any action that would do any of the following: impose a cap on cargo throughput or limit operations at the ports, require any actions that reduce pollution from sources that are exclusively under the purview of state or federal government, and it would prevent setting any shorter timeline for achieving zero-emission technology or zero-emission drayage trucks that was stated in the port's cleaner action plans. It would also require any use of public funds for only to be used for human-operated cargo equipment, or human-operated equipment, excuse me. And when talking about what action means, the bill is expansive. It defines action as a rule amendment, a pact, a covenant, an accord, settlement, pledge, letter of agreement, or declaration of intent, letter of understanding, or memorandum of understanding. So for example, you know, even a grant could be seen as something that might reduce pollution from equipment at the ports or vehicles. And so it's really tying our hands to reduce emissions, even in a collegial partnership way. It's really just shutting down all efforts to reduce emissions at the ports.
Who's the, I know, I see the author, but who's actually the sponsor of the bill? And, and what does that folks that are supporting this bill look like?
So the sponsors of the bill are the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association and ILWU. So PMSA and ILWU are the primary sponsors, and those supporting it are industry and chambers. And in opposition are the environmental justice groups. And I just yesterday heard from an environmental justice group that that list is expanding to larger organizations such as Union of Concerned Scientists, American Lung Association, Coalition for Clean Air, Earth Justice, the Impact Project, and many others, as well as our sister air agencies. CAPCOA has taken an opposed position, and Bay Area is bringing this bill for opposition this week.
No, I hear you. So the challenge with this bill is we're going from one extreme to the other. And, you know, obviously it seems to me like because this individual I presume is in the minority, it's probably going to fail. But nonetheless, though, we have to be very thoughtful, careful because of what's going on at the federal level. And so I would just suggest to consider, to think through what does a balanced port ISR look like? That's just my opinion, you know, in which potentially you're not making anybody happy, but yet it achieves some of the things that we need to get done. And at the same time, potentially some of the business community can be supportive. Don't know what that looks like. You know, we might have tried already. But the reason being that I am stating this is only because of the fact that whether we like it or not, and this bill fails, the feds are going to come in. And who knows what they're going to do. So just my thought on that. As far as AB 617 funding is concerned and the elimination thereof, what would it mean if we ran out of funding? What would it mean if they actually did eliminate it? And we consider what that plan of action actually looks like. And aside from that, what if we took a pause for a year if we needed to? I'd say that's the best case scenario, but only if we needed to, in order for us to obviously use whatever funding we do have to try to improve things in other areas. I'm not sure if that's possible, but it almost seems like, I mean, do we have any funding now for the rest of 2025 into 2026, the next budget cycle, to continue with AB 617? And if we don't, yeah, what is our plan of action? And does it make sense that we actually put a pause for a year until we actually do receive funding? That's just a question for maybe executive office or staff.
Hi, Supervisor. In answer to your question, yes, we are looking at all possibilities with regards to the funding potential or funding outlook. As you know, the funding for implementation has been on an annual basis. So each year we've had to go for funding. And I think as Alfredo had mentioned, there was the promise of continued funding previously, but Susan, our Chief Operating Officer, really is following the budgetary aspects and the implementation dollars versus the incentive dollars. So I'm going to ask Susan to talk about the implementation dollars, where we stand, and then how that would affect moving forward if we were to delete or to run out of implementation funds and still have incentive funds available.
So for AB 617 on the implementation dollars, we get roughly $21 million a year. And we do have some implementation dollars that can carry us over, but that translates into 90 positions. And so I have been working with staff already for probably about a year in the anticipation that there could be a taper because we're in the 5th year for the year one communities. And so we're already starting to look at that. If it were to be completely wiped out, I think there's a lot of very heavy thinking and, budget constraints that we're going to have to look at. We do have sort of the rainy day fund where it's still good, but as we look into the out years, it could be very, very tight for us. So we're looking at it right now, trying to be as proactive as possible as we move forward.
What does our rainy day fund look like? Is it at 20%, 15%, 30%?
It's actually greater than that right now.
At 40 some?
Yeah, about 40%, I think, right now.
It's about 40%, but the actual total dollar reserve was around 80 million. As you recall, when we went through the budgeting process, we're looking at drawing from the reserves for salaries that were recently negotiated. The 5-year projections, we always try to keep it at about 20%.
Yeah.
So we do have some funds, but we're trying to make sure that we focus on getting the funding for the program to move forward and making plans and a contingency just in case.
No, I hear you. I agree with you. But I always just suggest that, and having 40%, that's good job. We've been able to keep it at that level for I don't know how long. That's good news, better news than what we've heard so far. But I just would recommend that we don't go under 20%. Obviously, I think we'd have to make payroll at least for one more month, possibly 2 months, if all of a sudden something bad would happen with regards to future funding. So if we came to a standstill of sorts. So I just want to make sure that if we need to use reserves, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Obviously, knowing that we're going to be looking for funding wherever else we can get it. But I just would recommend not go below 20%. And then the other point is, so what's the relationship right now? What is what's the talk right now? The chatter, the rumor bill, the whatever, is Trump still trying to incarcerate, arrest Governor Newsom? Is that a topic of discussion, or is that a big joke, or is that something actually real? What's going on there? If you guys can tell me, those of you that are up there in Sacramento. Is that even a talk at all whatsoever?
Supervisor, I would say that it was a flippant comment by the president, much like he has a tendency to do. I think he made the comment, and since then we've seen that the U.S. District of Court has ruled that it was illegal for the president to take control of the military and to send them into LA. So I don't think there's much merit behind it. I don't think the governor or the legislature is much worried about it. I think they're more offended, and I think things have become very personal for them, especially after what has happened to Senator Alex Padilla.
Yeah.
I think the legislature is becoming more and more just, I think, offended and taking things personally.
Okay. Just wanted to raise the point. I think it's a big joke myself, but anyways, all right. I'm done with my questions for the meanwhile.
Just a quick follow-up to Mandy's comments about the budget and next fiscal year and the implementation funds. I know we just finished the Investment Oversight Committee Kurt and I sat in on, and Sujata was going over the 5-year forecast. And we've gone over this in our budget, and it really, I know in my city and a lot of other cities I've talked to, the 5 years doesn't look good. We may be up here now, as Manny said, we have 40%, but I know at that 5-year, what was it, Sujata, where we were at? And that's Wayne and Susan really with a needle dissecting the numbers.
In the 5th year currently, Vice Chair, it'll go down to about 13 or 14%.
So that's below our 20%.
Yes.
Without even considering Wayne, go ahead.
That's the 5-year projection, and it's based on very conservative estimates. If we go back 10 years at least, when we look at the rolling 5-year, we never get to that. And that is something that we watch like a hawk. And as Supervisor Perez said, we understand that 20% value is critical for us to maintain confidence in moving forward. And the other thing that I just wanted to note regarding AB 617 is that we still haven't received our funds for this year, which is about another roughly $20 million that we're due. So we'll still be able to move forward for the next year. But when you have so many FTE on the line, we need to be able to plan judiciously. And so Susan has been working very hard with all of the deputies to look at potential hiring, to look at replacements and all of that. So we're focused on the fiscal financial responsibility, thanks to Sujata, Susan, and the entire team, and well aware of how do we implement this. And that's why we're working with CAPCOA, with other individual air districts, with members directly on this. I think the thing that is really challenging is a lot of the uncertainty, and these are issues that we're trying to address by providing confidence in the value and the effectiveness of the programs.
And just I know you mentioned it to Manny, Susan, if we get zero money, let's say the budget doesn't work out in the state, they don't come to an agreement, zero for AB 617, how many positions are determined by this from that funding in our staff, and how many would be in danger of being laid off? Or
Well, I wouldn't go so far to say that those positions would be laid off.
good.
There are 90 positions that are associated with AB 617. We've already been working to take positions that are vacated that are tagged as AB 617 to sort of hold them right now in the anticipation. So we've been working on this for well over a year in terms of kind of strategizing for the agency. I think we're, like Wayne had said, the $21 million that is already slated for us. So we're good for another year. So we still have time to plan and be proactive and trying to figure out how we're going to address this.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any more questions or hands? Vice Mayor, anything, Brenda?
I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, is that okay? You're okay? Kurt? Okay, we're okay. Let's move on then. We've got only a few minutes. Federal legislative issues, if you can go over those, each one in about 30 seconds or less. Gary, we'll go to you first. Gary, go ahead.
Gary, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Surface transportation reauthorization is the next big legislative push after reconciliation. It's a re-up of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed in 2021. This is a bill that it's only passed once every 5 to 6 years, presents a lot of opportunities for us for funding and programs, the Olympics, Buy America, all these issues that we're concerned about. So we're going to be looking at it very closely. Starts later this year, early next year, they'll have draft bills drafted. There'll be votes. And then the goal is to get a bill passed by September of next year, but oftentimes it's kicked out to be extended. But we can get into more details of that as we go along. I'll just leave it there.
Thanks, Gary. Leo?
Yeah, really quick. The reconciliation process is underway. We expect the Senate Finance Committee to release text on their portion. They're the last committee that needs to report out. And then they will do some procedural stuff next week with the hope of being on the Senate floor the week of June 23rd. And this is again the one big beautiful bill that will address everything from Medicare, Medicaid to energy tax credits.
Thanks, Leo. Mark Kadish.
Good morning. I'll be very brief also. Just a quick update on the appropriations process. The process is starting very late. Incoming presidents are often late submitting their budget. This president submitted a so-called skinny budget that didn't have a lot of details. However, it did propose shifting or creating a 23% cut approximately in non-defense discretionary spending, which in the details that we do have would cause quite a bit of problems for some of the programs that we strongly support, like DERA 103, 105. The House has begun an appropriations process. They've started marking up a few bills. The one that we'll be watching closely is June 23rd, the House Interior Bill. The Senate has said it will not really begin work in earnest until after the reconciliation bill is finished, which will probably be sometime in July. So with the fiscal year ending September 30th, it's extremely likely that we'll have another continuing resolution. The only question is how long that will be and how deep the cuts will be. But we'll continue to work with staff and update you on that as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any quick questions for our Fed legislative consultants? I can't see any hands from here. Is there any public comment on this item from the public? I see no one in the auditorium. Raise your hands online if you want to comment. I see one hand. We'll limit it to 1 minute. Go ahead, Harvey, go ahead, please, and you're muted.
Hello, am I being heard?
Yes, go ahead, please, Harvey.
Okay, thank you. My name's Harvey Etter. I'm speaking for myself, Public Solar Power Co. and like-minded individuals, entities. There's a battle royal going down on immigration, energy, and environment. The energy and environment are right up here, and Musk is saying we got to have 90% plus solar, and Trump is saying drill, baby, drill. Musk is threatening to put money into a political party and stuff. We got to play this and do that politically with our consultants and everything else. So I'm throwing that out there. Let's discuss this and let's do something instead of waiting around for stuff to happen to us. And with the greater geopolitical stuff, we're looking at melting in a button or straight up. Bye.
Thank you, Harvey. And that concludes our public comment on that item. Item number 3, we'll try to get through this quick. Update on state legislative issues. We kind of went through it, but maybe if David, Ross, and Paul, if you want to add anything, under a minute each, if you can.
Sure, David Quintana. I just want to let everybody know we have a new pro tem elect in the Senate, and that will be Monique Limon. Looks like she will be taking over in early 2026. Details to be announced on the specific dates.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to add that the Governor Newsom signed an executive order yesterday in kind of response to some of the federal actions to really double down on clean vehicles and zero emission vehicles. So they asked CARB to start developing the Clean Cars 3 regulations to create a list of manufacturers complying with some of our partnerships in implementing cleaner vehicles for state procurement purposes. And additionally, to direct state agencies to look at ways that we can progress zero emission vehicles further.
Thanks, Russ. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to let you know, the Assembly just passed SB 101 off the Assembly floor. The vote was 57 to 19. Also, it's now going over to the Senate. The Senate's going in at 10 a.m. and they'll be bringing up the bill today as well. So just wanted to provide that for the committee as an update.
Good update, Paul. Thank you. Committee members, any quick questions for our state legislative consultants? Kurt says good luck. I don't see the vice mayor or supervisor Perez with any hands up. Are there any public comments on this item number 3, update on state legislative issues? If you'd like to comment, come forward or raise your hand, please. No one in the auditorium. Give people online a moment to raise their hands. It's 1 minute. Maybe
It's generally a set amount for the
total.
for the entire agenda. So I guess you were giving 1 minute for the entire agenda. So he would have however much time he has left.
About 30 seconds or so. Harvey, you've got still 30 seconds left on your public comment. Go ahead, please. Harvey, you're muted.
Hello, being heard? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm Harvey, the speaker for myself, PSDC, and like-minded folks and entities. Equity, it's required by CEQA to evaluate in socioeconomics. Just trying to jack around CEQA and whatnot and say it doesn't play. Okay, the worker-owned co-ops control that 2/3 of the country see no increase in wealth or equity in the last 50 years. Our democracy is threatened. We've got to deal with it, and that control and decision-making of how these things are developed have to be top priority. All right, that's the law.
Thank you, Harvey, for your comments. We'll move on to item number 4, other matters. Committee members, any other matters you want to bring up? Seeing no hands raised, we'll go to public comment period. Comment on items under our discretion on a legislative committee. You'll have 1 minute. Anybody in the auditorium like to comment? No one here. Anybody online would like to comment? Public comment, general public comment. Have a moment to raise your hands. The one hand raised. Harvey, go ahead. You've got 1 minute for public comment. Still muted.
Hello, being heard? How many minutes?
Yes, you've got a minute, Harvey. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. HE, PSPC, talking himself and others. Okay. The board rejected 11/11/11/21. Okay. Comments came. We tried to speak and couldn't. There were a bunch of people that couldn't. Okay. Chavez, a coalition cleaner, said that we're looking at. Y'all did this, and the federal implementation plan.
Comments related to this committee's agenda. We can move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Harvey. That concludes our public comment period. And item number 6 is next meeting date, second Tuesday. We're dark in July, second Friday in August 8th at 9 a.m. And without any other comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Board members, we need about 5 minutes